what I'm hoping is, you know, during Trump's era, there was so much of like standing against something. It's like, no, what he said, I'm against that. I'm against that. I hope that we're going to enter this area of like standing up for something, that when our government does something, the business community says, yes, we're all behind you, and here are all the ways that we are going to help support you with various actions that we're going to take. And to me, I just think there's something so powerful about that.
So welcome everybody to the third episode of Coffee with Purpose. It's great to see folks from across Toronto, New York, San Francisco joining in, different members of the lab community. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mike. Many of you know him already. He was previously leading social impact and public policy at Lyft. So he'll be chatting with us a bit about that.
I'd love to hear about kind of your experiences and accomplishments, because, you guys accomplished a lot in this last 5-6 years. Love just to kind of give the people who are listening a sense for what you did and the kinds of things you pushed forward when you were at Lyft and running social impact.
First off, it definitely wasn't me. It was a whole team of people. And when I got there in May of 2014, there was a little over 100 people at the company. And when I left, there was over 5,000. And it's funny, when I got there, as I left DC, a lot of colleagues and folks there said, it's crazy that you're going to this, ride share, fist bumping, pink mustache company. Like, you got to go to somewhere that's more serious, where you can have a bigger impact. And I had a sense that the ethos of the company was very much aligned with my values. And so right when I got to Lyft, it was an incredible moment, because we only had legislation for ride sharing in 2 states, in California and in Colorado at the time. And we were in battles with taxis, with governments, with bureaucracies. Obviously, we had a competitor that at the time had 30 times the amount of capital that we had. And so there was this sense that, like, it might not work. So let's just be honest and authentic to who we are, and let's be as innovative and creative as possible. And so I'm really proud, frankly, that we were able to get legislation passed in a way that was collaborative with governments, and the way in which we went about thinking about government relations in a holistic approach, meaning the notion of lobbying before was like, you get somebody who worked on Capitol Hill for 30 years, right, knocking on doors. Yeah. And there was a huge shift. We thought about government relations in a sense of, how do we actually work with politicians and policymakers, but how do we work with grassroots folks who are really affected by ride sharing if we took it away? How do we think about drivers who are making money, and what would happen to them if we took this away? How do we think about grass tops, third-party organizations and constituencies like older Americans who are now relying on ride sharing, people with disabilities and accessibility issues who are relying on ride sharing, the amount of people's lives who were saved because they weren't driving drunk with ride sharing? And so we thought about policy from this holistic lens, and incorporating comms and public affairs and ultimately social impact. And so while, there are obviously times where, we were working extraordinarily close with entities throughout the entire organization, I think having it in the policy shop allowed us to have a real focus.
You can be as candid as you want or not, but I want to talk about collaboration, specifically tied to Lyft and Uber coming together on Proposition 22, which just passed, right? And the pushback from labor groups is to say that this is not good for employees.
On this particular issue, back in 2015, a few of us were very focused on this future of work issue, and we collaborated with a whole host of other companies, of leaders, of think tanks, where we called for portable benefits, and Uber was not part of that. And so our ethos from the beginning on this future work was that the labor policies need to be shifted. We don't believe it should be this black or white employee or independent contractor model. And so we wanted to bring together a diverse array of people who will start thinking about portable benefits, with the notion that technology is shifting and people want flexible work. And so how do we preserve that flexibility while also providing these benefits for folks? And so this is an issue that the founders of the company took very seriously for many, many years, and have taken an approach where we want to actually work with labor. This could be a huge opportunity for labor. I don't want to speak for my colleagues over at Uber. I just think they took a different approach to this. For us, there was a real lens of humanity. These are people. These are real life folks who have families. Now, granted, the vast majority of them actually do have benefits and are doing Lyft in a very part-time manner. That being said, that shouldn't preclude us from thinking about minimum wage and thinking about the portable benefits and thinking about how to have a worker's voice in this process. And so while we always had to in some ways work with Uber, there was the manner in which we went about getting legislation passed was much different. And I'll say we learned a valuable lesson actually in Austin, where we did have to partner very closely with her in a proposition which we lost. And I think a big reason we lost was because we actually, I think, joined them at the hip a little too closely, and it became this perception that it was big bad tech versus the kind of folks of Austin. And so with Prop 22, we did we were all aligned, but I think you're going to see some pretty clear differentiations now. And John Zimmer was on a podcast a few days ago that was great with Kara Swisher, and I think he laid out a very interesting philosophy in terms of how we are going to be collaborating with labor and how there could be an interesting model to preserve this flexibility and innovation that we have, but also think about how we can preserve these benefits for folks.
Was there anything action you guys took or something that happened where you felt stung by the criticism and it forced you to kind of reverse course, or you said, no, we'll take it on the chin and we'll keep going because we know what we're doing is right?
Early on, Trump launched this like jobs board, and like Travis was on it, Elon Musk was on it, like all the who's were on this board. And we had folks calling us saying, hey, you guys, if you want to be real players, you really got to be on this board. And we had pretty spirited discussions around what would it mean for us not to be on the board? Would there be a perception that Lyft wasn't serious about policy? At the end of the day, we felt that it was just against our values to be part of this board. We were obviously going to have to work with the administration, no doubt, but we didn't need to necessarily be in this inner circle. And we didn't know, what would happen. We didn't know that, months later there would be Charlottesville and the whole board would be disbanded. And anyone who was part of that board, sort of like had, a little bit of a tinge of criticism or smell to them. But, at the moment, in that moment, you don't know if what you're doing is actually going to hurt the company or help the company. And so I felt really proud that we stuck to our values, and it turned out being the right decision. But those choices you make in those moments, you don't really have a lot of evidence to go off of. It's like your gut, and you listen to people's advice, and then you try to do your best to stay true to who you are. I think it's going to continue to be important for CEOs and brands to speak out, but I don't think it has to be so political in nature. I think we can go back to actually standing up authentically for what companies and what CEOs frankly believe in, because it's important. There will be expectations from employees. I don't think that's going away. I think this notion of employee activism is going to be here. And I think it's going to be, CEOs and companies are going to have to wrestle with that. But my hope is that, under a Biden presidency, the volume and the heat will get turned down a bit, and you'll be able to, I think, actually talk about things like climate change in a way that isn't so divisive, in a way that is like makes sense. Of course, every company should be thinking about how to be the most sustainable company as possible.
So I want to pivot. I want to ask you, we do these Coffee with Purpose chats. We do rapid fire questions. Okay. First thing you'll do when you get the vaccine?
Surf trip somewhere, maybe Mexico, maybe Bali.
One company you would love to transform with social impact?
I don't want to say transform. I'll just say to my friends at Amazon, I think you can do more.
All right. I think that's fair. They could do a whole lot more.
Thank you so much, Mike, for joining us. Thank you, everybody who tuned in today. And for anybody watching this, we're sharing them on YouTube. So if you're enjoying the series, like, subscribe so you can stay up to date. And we'll be back next week with the next episode of Coffee with Purpose. Thanks so much.
Mike, thanks for your time. We always enjoy chatting and hearing your perspective. So thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.